Hi, welcome to another episode of London Lights. I'm your host, Dan Mailer. I'm really pleased to have as our guest today, rapper Shad. Shad, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Shad, let me just give viewers a little bit of background on yourself for those not familiar with you. You were born in 1982. You're better known as Shad. Full name, Shadrach Kabango. Did I get that right?
Right, that's it.
You're a Canadian rapper and broadcaster. You've released 6 studio albums since 2005. 4 of your albums have been shortlisted for the Polaris Music Prize, and you won a Juno Award for Rap Recording of the Year in 2011. In 2013, listen to this, CBC Music named you as the second greatest Canadian rapper of all time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is quite an accolade. You also hosted the show Q on CBC Radio 1 from 2015 to 2016, and you host the International Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary series known as Hip Hop Evolution 2016 to present, which is shown on HBO Canada and Netflix. Shad, it's a pleasure having you to the program. You are a Londoner, and we're very proud of you and happy to speak with you today.
Thanks. Yeah, love London. It's where I grew up and love talking London, love talking music. So glad to be here.
Well, on that point, I know a lot of our viewers like to hear some of the basic background, some basic things such as where did you live? East Adelaide? Were you in the west part of town?
So my family came to London when I was a year old. My family's from Rwanda originally, and we landed first in, I'm going to give all the London detail because I know I'm talking to an audience that knows what I'm talking about. So we were first in the apartment buildings beside Westmount Mall,
Southdale?
Southwest.
Okay.
So on Wonderland. Wonderland, just a little bit south of Westmount Mall. That's where we were first, our first apartment. And then we lived around Baseline Road West, so right beside Westminster High School until I was about 12. Right beside it. And then we moved, around Huron and Adelaide, a little bit east of Adelaide is where I lived for most of junior high and high school.
All right. Now, your parents, you said, were from Rwanda and Kenya, correct?
Yeah, so my family's from Rwanda originally. I was born in Kenya. My sister was born in Uganda. I won't go into that long story of how that came to be.
And when you came to Canada, I think you were only 1 year old, correct?
That's right.
So, I mean, the culture shock that your parents must have experienced must have been incredible. Have they ever shared any of those experiences with you?
There's a couple things that stand out for me. One is just the era in which they moved, right? So if we were to move across the globe in 2021, there's so much we could know about where we're going. You could literally do a Google map and see the place.
True.
You know, imagine trying to find out about London, Ontario from East Africa when you're in 1983.
Wow.
I mean, there's literally nothing you can know.
Yeah, exactly.
Aside from maybe a phone call or a letter from somebody you know that's already there. So that really stands out for me. This was like sight unseen. Of course, snow is a foreign concept, all these things, right? So yeah, culture shock for them for sure. But they, again, without getting into all the background, they had a history of being displaced and having to move from place to place and be introduced to new cultures and stuff. So they definitely had the fortitude for it, and they had a little bit of experience with it, and they knew why they were coming, and I think that grounded them. I think that their relationship grounded them, their faith grounded them, and they also found a community, actually a couple of different sort of strong communities in London. My dad actually started the first African Association of London. So if you can imagine, again, 1983, there's so few. This is a first wave kind of African immigration to Canada early. And so my dad formed an association that was anyone from Africa. Like, you know, this is a big continent. People don't speak the same language, but there is at least certain commonalities in terms of experience and what people want for their kids, and some threads in terms of culture. Um, so they found community. They're just kind of resilient and smart people, and so they figured it out.
So where did you go to high school, for instance, and how was that experience?
Yeah, so I went to. I'll back up just a little bit because my parents put my sister and I in French school, French first language.
Okay.
So again, them not really having the cultural background, they came to Canada and they found out, oh, you can put your kid in a school where they learn another language and it's also free. Well, we're going to do that. And they didn't speak French.
Okay. Wow.
So a little bit of an uncommon move, but again, where they grew up, everyone speaks 3 or 4 languages. I mean, it's just that's the norm, right? So they put us in French school, and I give that background because for high school, I went to Central, but at the time, Central had the French public high school within it.
Mm.
I don't know if any of your viewers remember those days, but from I think it was like 79 until maybe 99, the French public high school that's now called Gabriel Dumont was housed inside of Central. So, yeah, that's where I went for high school.
Okay, now look, I'm an old guy. You're much younger than me. But my very first experience with rap music was a song by Bob Dylan called Subterranean Homesick Blues. I don't know if you know that one. There's a video of it where he's got these signs and Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine.
Yes.
I'm thinking, that's pretty cool, whatever that is. I didn't think of it as any genre of music at the time. It was a guy on guitar and the words were coming 100 miles a minute. And then a gospel artist, Larry Norman, did a takeoff on that song called Reader's Digest, which was very cool as well. And that was all in the 60s.
Yeah.
But when do you get your first exposure to rap? And what's your experience when you hear this? Is it a genre of music that you immediately identify with and you're interested in and you want to be part of that? Or what was that like for you?
I'm of the generation where, yeah, rap was kind of always around, you know. So I don't really have a memory of a time when it wasn't around. My first memories are probably Maestro Fresh West, who's considered the godfather of Canadian hip hop, and seeing his videos. And also when I was really young, 6 or 7, was a moment where kind of pop rap was breaking through. Artists like MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice and Crisscross, like some these little moments of kind of rap breaking into the mainstream, like top of the charts type stuff. So I don't really have a memory of there not being rap music around. And I think I was immediately drawn to it, like I was drawn to all music at that time. But especially hip hop was the cutting edge music. It was it was the youth music when I was growing up, and of course it was black music when I was growing up. So I identified with the images on the screen and the people. These are young black people being storytellers and having fun and celebrating who they are and where they're from. So there was this natural draw, I think, to all of it. And finally, I'll say there was a draw to it for me because the barriers to entry in terms of performance were really low, right? If you want to rap with your friends, you don't need equipment, you don't need music lessons, you can just try it and have fun with it. And so I think I was immediately drawn to that too.
It's like in sports. If you want to be a hockey goalie, for instance, you got to go out and invest $1,000 to get all the equipment. But using the sports analogy, you play soccer, you get a ball, and you make a net somehow. And I just love the beauty and the simplicity of that. So now you're interested in the music, but when does Shad start rapping?
I was messing around with it with friends all through junior high and high school. But it wasn't something that I took seriously because, and you'll remember this, Dan, like recording music was not as easy as it is now, right? I went to high school in the 90s, and that was still before the home studio era, right? It was really hard to get in the studio and record music. And then rap music in particular, you needed these certain pieces of equipment. You needed sampling machines,
Right.
and you needed to know how to use them, and
Yeah.
they're very expensive. And knowing how to use them, like somebody had to teach you. Again, there's no YouTube
Mm.
to teach you how to use these sampling machines, and you needed records, which is
Yeah.
not cheap if you're a teenager. So the idea of making music was not really in my imagination when I was in high school.
Right.
It wasn't until um, I was at Laurier University where, for one thing, the barriers in terms of technology started to lower a bit. And I knew a couple of friends from high school, actually, Niles and Anton, and they had home studio setups and knew how to make, authentic rap music using computers now instead of these super expensive and prohibitive sampling machines. Um, and yeah, and also the barriers in terms of distribution of music were getting lower. So that's when I started to go, maybe this is possible.
Mm.
Maybe I could take some steps into this, like professionally. But
Yeah.
prior to that, it wasn't even in my imagination. I went to Laurier to study business, and that was what I was going to do.
Well, before you get to university, though, you're still in London. You're at high school in London, and you're probably buying records or CDs. You're listening to the radio. Tell us about those experiences, because I think Londoners may be able to identify with that.
In terms of radio stations, we all listened to 106.9 FM a lot at that time. That was sort of like um, top 40, but a lot of hip hop and R&B, and of course, with the CanCon regulations, you're getting a lot of Canadian artists as well. So shout out to Fanshawe, and then 94 point. Well, I think at that time it was 94.7 or something, but now it's 94.9. CHRW Radio Western had a couple of important hip hop shows too, because they played some underground stuff,
Mm.
stuff that you could not hear, again, pre-internet. Like you could not hear on Much Music, and you could not hear on mainstream radio. So that was some important exposure. And then in terms of record stores, Dr. Disc was the
Mm.
was the big one downstairs in the basement with DJ Rez. All the hip hop records were down there. And then there was a store called Soul Choice while I was in high school that was a clothing store. Brother and sister, I think from California, opened it. And in the back, there was a record store that Fat Mike operated.
Cool.
DJ on CHRW, important guy, and he put us on to a lot of music in high school. So we would hang out around there a lot.
All right, we're going to take a break, Shad. Hold those thoughts. We're going to come back at you and hear more about your rise to success as a Canadian rapper. But viewers, stay with us. We're just going to have a short commercial break. We'll be right back with Shad the Rapper. Okay, we're back with Shad the Rapper, second best rapper in Canada, of course, according to the CBC, and number one in our hearts here in London, Ontario, because Shad's a Londoner. I'm going to ask you to define hip hop music, rap music in a moment. But a lot of times we think of it as coming from the mean streets of an urban culture of some type. And I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. I mean, I grew up east of Adelaide as well in London, Ontario. And I had my experience, so to speak, with mean streets, but nothing like an urban center like LA or Chicago. Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested in getting your definition of rap music, hip hop, and how your experiences in London might have impacted that. Were there mean streets in London, Ontario?
To the first part of your question, yeah, hip hop is music that started in officially in the Bronx, in New York in the 70s. And it's really New York, Bronx culture from that time. So it was all the records that they liked to play and the style in which they liked to play them, which ended up being influential. So to get into a little bit more detail, basically, they like to play the drums from James Brown records, from Latin records, from rock records, from any records. The funky dance part, okay, is what they like to play. And the great innovation of hip hop, I may be giving you more background than you need, but the great innovation of it was looping sections of a record, right? Prior to that, people thought a record player was for putting the record on and walking away.
Yeah.
And these young kids, 13, 14, were figuring out ways to loop sections of a record perfectly, 4 bars, 8 bars, how to loop it, and how to scratch it. And of course, breakdancing, came out of that time, which is really what spread
Mhm.
hip hop. People think it was rapping, but it was breakdancing that caught the imagination of the whole world, right? And then rapping after that.
Yeah.
So that's where rap music comes from. And initially, it was party music. It was fun music, and then people, as rapping started to grow as a component of it, people started to figure out that you could tell more stories and you could tell real stories. And so that's where we get the sense, I think, of what you're talking about, Dan. Like, hip hop is about these gritty tales of the inner city, right?
Yeah.
And it is. That's the foundation. But the inspiration, I think, that came from that was passed on from that, is that anybody can tell their story. So to your kind of question about London specifically, and how hip hop fits into London, well, rap music is a vehicle for anyone to tell their story, and I think it appeals especially to people who, yeah, who might be going through challenges, which, and that exists everywhere. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be in, um, you know, west side of Chicago to be dealing with issues. Um, and I think it also appeals to people who have an identity that's maybe misunderstood or maybe marginalized, and they want to tell their story and they want to celebrate who they are and where they're from. And I think that also applies to, a lot of people everywhere, which is why hip hop is at this point the biggest music in the whole world.
All right, Shad, we've only got 10 minutes left, and I know a lot happened in your career that we still have to cover. So let me make this quick. When did you start recording, and when and what came about to bring national attention to Shad the Rapper? Tell me about that.
My first album I recorded in 2004. So there was a unsigned talent competition that was put on by a radio station based in Kitchener Waterloo, actually, where I was going to school at that time. And it was an unsigned talent competition. So the winners got $17,000 to record an album.
Mm.
I didn't know anything about recording an album, but I figured it out as I went along. So that was my first album, and I used that to play some shows. Played a lot of shows in London, and developed a bit of a fan base, and got signed and put out a second album called The Old Prince that I recorded in London, and that was the album that really kind of allowed me to gain an audience nationally. I was nominated for a Juno and for the Polaris and stuff. So that was the album that really, I would say, gave me a career, was my second one.
And you mentioned when we had some pre-interview discussions, another album called TSOL.
That's right.
And I found that kind of interesting. Tell me about that album.
So that was my third album. So yeah, I say the second one kind of got me an audience across the country and allowed me to sort of do this as a career. And then the third one, TSOL, I won a Juno for that album. I didn't record it in London, but played some fun shows off of that album in London. I remember that 2 nights at Call the Office. It was super fun. Yeah, and that was a great experience. Toured in the States with Chaos on that album, and toured with Kanon across Canada. So I have went to Europe, had some great memories around that album, including in London.
And what's TSOL mean? I'm curious. Tell me about that.
It's lost backwards.
Okay.
And I really like that idea, because the problem when you're lost is that for most of the time you don't know you're lost. And you need something to reflect back to you that you're lost. So most of the time that you're lost, to me, you're TSOL, until someone reflects or something reflects back to you that you're lost. So that's the meaning of it to me. And yeah, it's not a concept album, but like I like that meaning as far as a collection of songs that reflect that stage in life. I was in my late 20s and just trying to figure things out, and am I lost or not, and all the confusion and angst and beauty that comes with that time. So I like that title as a kind of overarching thing over that collection of songs.
So would you say that there's a common theme or message in your music? You've done at least 6 albums now. What is Shad Sane.
The funny thing is, I never thought I had a message. Like, if someone would have asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd have been like, no, I'm just making songs, you know. But now when I look back, I absolutely have a message. I kind of say the same thing out every album. And the message, I think, is um, about trying, continuing to try, continuing to push forward, to kind of cling to my best values and ideals, um, and not compromise those. Ultimately, it's the message I need to hear, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, all my music is about peace, and how difficult peace is, you know, internally and with our fellow human beings, you know, with our human family. So ultimately, I think that's all my music is. I actually have one line on, not this line, but the one before it, where I say, it's like maybe the last song on the album. I say, I guess I'm still singing the same song, the one about trying. Only thing that I can say without lying. You know, like.
Mm. Well, you know, there's such an important message right now, Shad. The human condition, it seems to be conflict, and we're in troubled, escalated conflict times right now. But I got to tell you, I took some time to watch some of your videos on YouTube, and I saw Rose Garden, for instance, Fam Jam, Keep Shining, Black Averageness. That's probably a whole another segment right there. And then the Fool Part One, Get It, Got It, Good. I'll tell you, they were great videos, and I enjoyed the songs, and they were very positive and infectious, and I liked the vibe. And I encourage our viewers, if you're not familiar with any of Shad's music, to go out and watch some of those videos. Looked like one of them you were shooting maybe with an iPhone.
Yeah. One is definitely with an iPhone. I made all of those videos you just mentioned. I'm pretty sure, with a director who's from London as well, Justin Broadbent. He went to Banting, and we both share a lot of the same early inspirations as far as videos, lo-fi. You know, all those videos you mentioned. They're simple, right? And they try to have just a kind of simple charm to them, right? And a joy around just music.
Now, you are a Christian. You're known as a Christian singer, rapper. Does your Christian belief come into your music and your inspiration, and perhaps impact on the message you're trying to get across?
Yeah, definitely. You know, in hip hop, in black music in general, you know, that's a common thread. Like, from Whitney Houston to Kendrick Lamar, you know, it's like a lot of us come from the church, and that's an important source of hope, of inspiration, of imagination, creativity, right? Like, to be steeped in the stories that I'm steeped in, right?
Mhm.
Stories that are really kind of countercultural and revolutionary and very rich. You know, I feel like a lot of my imagination grows out of that, grows out of a really countercultural message of peace. Um, all of these things, like you said, conflict is the human condition, and you know what we practice and believe in our religion is that peace is possible and unity is possible, um, but it's divine.
Yeah.
All of that is very rich, you know, inspiration for me and for so many in hip hop.
Well, you know, Shad, that's a refreshing message, and it's wonderful to hear you say that. So there's going to be people watching this program, young people that are probably thinking of going down the path or dreaming of going down the path you've gone down. Do you have any words of inspiration for them? I'd love to hear from you about that.
I do. I love talking to young people that are on this journey of telling their stories, you know. And if there's anything that I would say, is just a couple of things. One, make sure you enjoy the journey, because we see the story time and time again of people in music that get to hear
Mm.
and they're miserable. Don't be that person. Don't be that person, because that contradicts the whole point. So enjoy every step of the way. Like the odds that you get here, first of all, are slim. But if you do, don't get here and hate it. And the second thing I would say is trust your intuition, trust your gut. Don't hand over your common sense to anybody, because the world needs you to be you. And your gut and your instincts are precisely the thing. And the last thing I'll say on that note that I love, I heard recently, so this is borrowed, this isn't my advice, but I heard an interview with Pharrell Williams, a great producer, and he said that, and I hope viewers can follow me here. He said that individuality isn't the persona you craft. Okay, so artists can get really interested in crafting a artist persona to present to the world. He said it's not the persona you craft, it's resistance, and it's how you resist. It's a subtle distinction, but it's how you resist. It's how you resist these pressures trying to get you to conform, trying to get you to hand over your common sense, trying to get you to hand over your joy as you pursue this thing. How do you resist? And that is deep, that's spiritual. That's joy a lot of times. Joy can be resistance.
Shad, great message. We're out of time. I got to let you go, but let me say this. In the hearts of Londoners, you are the best rapper and the #1 rapper in Canada, #1 in our hearts. You're a London light. It's been a pleasure having you on the program, and thanks for being part today.
Thanks for having me. Love talking London.